Hey, what's up guys, Guardian here, coming to you guys with a deck profile today on my Royal Paladin deck for the standard format in Cardfight Vanguard. So, yep, really happy to be able to profile this deck for you guys. I've been working on it for the past couple of weeks now. The only thing I really need is a 4th copy of King of Knights Alfred, but I'm looking into getting that for next week probably, so we'll just go with how the deck is for now, and yeah, you can make small little tweaks to it as you see fit. But yeah, without further ado, we'll get into the deck profile and I'll show you guys what I play. So first, to start with the grade 3s, we're of course playing 3 copies of King of Knights Alfred. Like I said, I'm probably going to get my 4th one next week, so bear with me on that. But yeah, Alfred, he's absolutely amazing. So once per turn, you can counterblast 1 to search your deck for up to 1 Blaster Blade, call it to rearguard, and it gets 5,000 power. So it allows us to search out Blaster Blade from the deck quite consistently, which is really cool. Allows them to put them to more use, and also the extra 5k actually goes quite a long way because with a lot of the 8k boosters that we have available, we can easily get Blaster Blade to a 23k column, which is pretty solid as a magic number. It just sort of covers all bases in terms of power levels with Force, and also Protect and Excel numbers as well, being 12ks. So yeah, and of course the second effect is during your turn, whilst on Vanguard, if you have a Blaster Blade on your rearguard circle, this unit gets 10,000 power. So classic Alfred ability, you know, he gets more powerful depending on your units. So this time they've decided to design Alfred around Blaster Blade centrically. And yeah, if you have a Blaster Blade, Alfred gets bigger, gets to 23 on his own. And then obviously you start applying your force markers. You might put one on the Vanguard circle, make it 33, and you know, get to other numbers as well, which is pretty huge. So yeah, he's basically that threat that Royal Paladin needed to make the Vanguard attacks more scary. So yeah, he really does fit the role of the deck very well. So we'll put Alfred up here. And then we'll move on to the next grade 3, which is going to be 3 copies of Soul Saver Dragon. So unlike Alfred, I'm probably going to keep Soul Saver in the deck at 3. And my reasoning for this is that I don't think Soul Saver is that great of a card in the early game because, yeah, sure, the Soul Blast is pretty nutty. I think we can all agree with that. Soul Blast 5 to get 15,000 power on 6 of your units, so basically your entire board. But the problem with Soul Saver is that if you're using that effect too early, you're pretty much putting it to waste, and you're not making it as threatening as it could be. So, for example, if your opponent's on like maybe 1 or 2 damage, they can just easily no-guard some of your attacks and just not care about how big those numbers are. So for me, Soul Saver is more of that sort of mid to late game, when both of you and your opponent are on grade 3. You sort of want to use it in the mid game state where your opponent's at like maybe 3 or 4, 5 or 6 damage would be preferable. This is the thing. Soul Saver against different gifts, I've noticed, acts differently. So against another Force deck, you know, it's going to be pretty, you know, generic. You know, it's just going to pressure them simply and just go with that. But against Excel, Soul Saver is more of a finisher because they're going to be dedicating so many more cards to the board compared to you, that they're going to just fall back on defensive cards. So they're really going to suffer when you get to the Soul Saver turn and just hit them for tons of power. They just won't be able to handle it. But against Protect, which at the minute is only OTT, they're mainly going to be generating loads of hand size, and you need to sort of give them a reason to use up their perfect cards, because they're going to be getting those gift markers like every time they ride, and it sort of becomes a bit redundant, especially when you're trying to pressure the opponent with your Vanguard attacks. Soul Saver is sort of that way of you to tell the opponent, okay, I'm going to force you to use those perfect cards out your hand because you're not using them. So I'm going to give you a damn good reason to use them now. Yeah, you sort of need to be a bit more careful when you're using the Soul Blaster Soul Saver, but it definitely acts differently in different scenarios is what I'm saying. So yeah, that's what I noticed with him. But I think 3 copies is fine. You know, you can run 4 if you want to, but I think 3 is okay. Because I was running it at 2 before, but 3 does feel a lot better in my opinion. And then lastly for the grade 2s, we're running 2 copies of Alfred Early. So I'm probably going to be taking 1 copy of him out for the 4th King of Knights Alfred. But Alfred Early I still feel as though it's worth playing because he actually adds value to the deck in the ways of he makes your Blaster Blade a bit more, just a bit better overall, because not only do you have the chance of obviously riding the Blaster Blade in your game, But because of that, you're actually creating this scenario where Blaster Blade becomes a good ride target because you have the Alfred Early in the deck. Because at the minute, if I just get the grade 2s here, at the moment, Akane is pretty much the only decent grade 2 you've got that you can ride on the Vanguard. I mean, yeah, sure, you can ride Blaster Blade and potentially pressure with the crit effect if the scenario calls for it, or maybe use the retire effect, but you're not really going to be doing that in the early game because there's not going to be like many big threats that you want to get rid of that massively. So Alfred Early sort of creates this scenario where Blaster Blade actually becomes a good ride target for the grade 2, just so that you can call them back out later on as an additional resource for you to build up your board again. So that's pretty cool. And also you get the 10,000 power boost as well, which is actually pretty huge. And also you get an extra draw. So you're getting a resource from the soul back onto the rear guard to fill your board up, and also you're drawing a card. But that's the other thing, is that even though you do have the chance of not riding the Blaster Blade, it doesn't necessarily make Alfred worse. You just sort of have to flex around how your current hand is, basically. So if you don't ride the Blaster Blade, yeah, sure, you don't get the call from the soul, but you can still use his effect to call Blaster Blade from hand still, which I think is still decent, especially because you get that draw and the 10k power. So yeah, I think Alfred is pretty decent. So, but like I said, I'm probably going to just keep him in at 1 and swap the other one out for another King of Knights Alfred. So that's what I'm going to do there, probably. So yeah, that is basically my grade 3s. So we'll move on to the grade 2s. So for the grade 2s, we're of course running 4 copies of Blaster Blade. Yeah, like I just said, it just becomes a bit better because you've got Alfred Early in the deck, so he's a good ride target now for you to consider. But talking more about Blaster Blade, like ignoring the Alfred skills here, so Blaster Blade as a unit on his own, the crit effect is very, very situational. Like, you don't want to be going for it all the time. It really depends on what deck you're versing and what your current hand says. You know, do you have the necessary pieces to make the board worthwhile making for the extra crit? And is the deck you're playing a good matchup for you where the extra crit would actually make sense to do it against? So, for example, if I was going against Excel, I probably wouldn't do it because I don't want to be like dropping majority of my hand down when they're going to be doing multiple attacks against me on their turns probably. So yeah, and then against OTT in Protect, I probably would, because I know that because they get perfect guards later on with the grade 3 rides, it gets a bit more difficult to actually apply damage to them. So I kind of want to push them for damage as quick as I can early game, and then start pressuring them with the huge attacks later on to sort of get those perfect guards out of the hand. And yeah. And then the retire effect of Blaster Blade, it does come up sometimes, but it is quite costly. A Soul Blast and a Counter Blast is pretty hefty in terms of a cost, but it does come up sometimes. Like, your opponent will just have certain units on the field that you just want to get rid of them like as soon as possible. And Blaster Blade does provide Royal Paladin with the ability to get rid of things on the board. You know, it gives them the power to actually spot remove units, which is actually very useful. So you'll notice in some decks sometimes they might actually call down some of their grade 3s as rear guards, which, you know, we can do that as well, which I'll get to later on. But especially in like decks like Novas or OTT, you might notice some rear guards where, wow, like you need to get rid of that thing, sort of thing. And you know, a Counter Blast and a Soul Blast, although it is quite hefty, it might be the only way you've got to secure that retire and get that unit off the board completely. So yeah, so as a unit, he's very solid, but he just gets more valuable now because we have Alfred Early in the deck, and of course King of Knights Alfred can just search for him, so he's a constant threat that'll just keep coming out all the time. So yeah. And then next, of course, we've got 4 copies of Akane, which is yeah, safe to say she is pretty damn good. You know, Vanguard rear guard when placed, Counter Blast 1, search your deck for a Pongal, call it to the rear guard, and then shuffle your deck. So searches out the Pongal, which of course allows you to soul charge as long as there's a unit in the same column as it, which is also good because you're fueling the soul for Soul Saver Dragon for that play. And also continuous Vanguard rear guard. During the battle that this unit was boosted by a high beast, this unit gets 3,000 power. So that's actually really cool because this makes the grade 1 lineup that I've got kind of make a bit more sense when you see it, but I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, she just overall creates really good numbers in general. because of that high beast ability, but also just a really good resource to just build board with as well. So yeah, she is really, really cool. And then the final grade 2 is going to be 3 copies of Sage of Arts Jauron. So yeah, Jauron, pretty simplistic. If you've got 3 or more rear guards, he becomes a 15,000 power grade 2. But of course, the main thing is that just any grade 1 with an 8k base is going to make this 23k, which is, like I've mentioned, it's a really good magic number to meet just in general, and just helps you apply pressure with your rear guard attacks essentially. So yeah, really, really good card. So next, moving on to the grade 1s, we've got 4 copies of Little Sage Marron. So Marron is pretty cool. He allows you to basically refuel your hand by calling your units essentially. So basically by doing royal things, you get a benefit. So yeah, this is a bit, it's quite interesting because of course getting that draw is pretty good. And also Marron gets 3,000 power when you do this. But the thing I've noticed is that you might do this more often against different decks. So a good example is Kagero, for example. They're a very threatening deck, especially with like Draconic Overlord and Draconic Waterfall. So you might actually change your strategy a little bit and use Marron's effect a bit more often, just so that you can draw more resources to help deal with their Vanguard attack. So yeah, it becomes one of those cards where it's like, do you have a spare Counterblast? You might as well get a draw out of it. But if you can't spare the Counterblast, you got to debate whether if it's worth still going for it or not. Like I said, if you're going against Kagero, you might actually go for it just for the more draw power, and just keep your board at a good level, whilst keeping your hand size at a decent level as well. So yeah, Marron has been really, really cool, so definitely recommend playing that. And then next we have the 4 copies of Pongal, of course, to go with the Akane. I don't know what it is with Pongal, but he loves not staying in my deck for some reason. You know, maybe that symbolizes the artwork, essentially. That's why he looks like he's going really fast. Because he's running the hell out of my deck all the time, and I have no idea why. But yeah, you got to run 4 just to make it consistent with Akane, of course. Just insane amounts of soul charges that you can get from him as well, to help fuel the soul saver, which is cool. But the one thing about Pongal that I love is just the design of it, like with the skill. So if you do whiff with the soul charge and you put in a trigger, it doesn't really matter because the skill says, okay, you got a bit of bad luck there, you got a trigger for the soul charge, but you know what, I'm going to give you 5,000 power, and that's going to make really easy column numbers, you know, 23, 26 with Akane, which is just really, really good to decide where to put that power. You know, you might swing that 26 at a rearguard column, which is pretty decent, but then you might just focus the attack on the Vanguard since it's already got to that 23k threshold, and you might just push it even further, essentially, just to pressure the Vanguard more often. But yeah, of course, for Pongal, he's pretty much a staple in the deck at the minute. And then moving on, we have 3 copies of Wingal. So this is my personal choice. I don't think I've seen many other lists run this many copies of Wingal. I think they've like maybe run 1 or 2. But I ran 3 because this is my reason. So the thing is that because you have King of Knights Alfred, you've got King of Knights Alfred being able to search out your Blaster Blades really easily. With Wingal in the deck, you're making those Blaster Blade columns more consistently better with numbers. And numbers is everything, basically, in Standard. The better the numbers, the more shield they're going to have to guard with, the more cards they might have to go up to guard your attacks. And I think, personally, Wingal has more of a place in this deck than I think he's getting taken granted for, because, like I said, because you can easily search the Blaster Blade with King of Knights Alfred, you can make really big columns with the Blaster Blade, but even if you don't get the power gains from the Alfreds, you're still making consistent 23k columns with the Blaster Blade. But then the other benefits of Wingal is that since he's High Beast, he also functions with Akane to make 21k columns, and since he's just an 8k generically, he works with Jauron to make 23 columns as well. So overall, I see a lot of versatility with Wingal, even though he's like very, you know, narrow in terms of what he does in terms of a skill. But I think he works pretty well in the deck. And like I said, he makes Blaster Blade a bigger threat, which is kind of what you want to do, because without the Wingal, the only really thing you're going to be doing with Blaster Blade is to make like 18k, 21k columns, and sometimes 23 with the Alfred skill. Yeah, it kind of gets a bit if and R, really, about Blaster Blade's power levels and how threatening he is. So Wingal actually adds that extra layer to Blaster Blade. It makes him even better. And like I said, when you if you do decide to go for that Blaster Blade turn for the extra critical as well, Wingal will just support that as well, because you can put the Wingal behind the Blaster Blade Vanguard and make that 23k column with an extra crit in it as well. So that makes it even more likely for that to actually succeed, which I've noticed doesn't really succeed a lot of the time if you don't have a decent-sized Vanguard. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I've been liking 3 Wingals so far. And then the final grade one that I'm using is 3 copies of Lion Mane Stallion. Now, Lion Mane Stallion has got a lot of things about him that I like, and I'm probably going to forget one of them, but I'm going to try and note them off here. So, first of all, if you have 4 more rear guards, he gets 3000 power. Very simple effect. But because he's 7k, he's going to be a 10k grade 1. So, he's a 10k grade 1 booster for your Vanguards, so you can easily get bigger magic numbers just by boosting with him. Also, you can make it so that if you do call any of your grade 3s to rear guard, which, you know, isn't crazy to think of, you know, there are loads of occasions where you might be low on resources or just good units to attack with, and maybe you've got an extra grade 3 that you don't mind attacking with and calling to the rear guard. So in those occasions, Lion Mane Stallion actually helps you create good numbers still by boosting these up to 23. So that's also good there. But then also the main application of Lion Mane Stallion is that the fact that you can combo this with Akane to essentially make really easy 23k columns, because he's a high beast as well. So 10 under 13 is going to be 23. But even if not, like let's say you're going to be using Blaster Blade instead, this is actually a good combination here against like an Excel deck, for example, because again, since they're generically a rearguard heavy clan, you're going to be pressuring with them Blaster Blade, retiring the rear guards, and then because you've got an extra 10k on top of the Blaster Blade, 20k is a pretty good number to be attacking with onto rear guards, because that's going to pressure at least like a 15k shield out of their hand at least. So yeah. But yeah, obviously in the main application, Akane making 23k columns to pressure the Vanguard with. So he's got so many applications about him, and there was actually one thing about this card that I noticed recently, which was actually quite funny, which was I was against an OTT deck, and they went first. So they rode into Circle Magus, where of course if you ride upon it, you can counterblast 1 to draw a card. Now, my turn came up, and the only grade 1 I had to ride was the Lion Mane Stallion. But this is quite interesting, because since he's a 7k, my attack wouldn't hit. But that's kind of a good thing, because that means they wouldn't get the counterblast to then use Circle Maker's ability to get the draw. But even if I do get the trigger, it's still fine though. I mean, yeah, sure, they get the counterblast now to get the draw, but because triggers are so valuable now, like, getting any of these is just so good. Like, you'll get the critical to get the extra damage through, so you're pushing them, getting them to those higher damage counts to pressure them in the late game. You'll get the draw probably to get, like, an extra draw and a perfect guard added to your hand, by the way. And also the heals. The heals are probably the worst one, because you're probably not going to get the heal effect probably, but you got a 20k shield added to your hand, so I don't think you can complain too much there. But yeah, that was quite an interesting interaction I had there. So because he was a 7k, it actually benefited me a bit more, because no matter what the outcome was, it was still good for me, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that was kind of cool. But yeah, generically, he's got so much applications around all the different units in the deck, and that small interaction there with OTT was actually pretty funny. But yeah, I think he's great, so I like seeing him quite a lot, so that's why I'm running 3. But like I say, with these ratios, you can like cut a couple of them. Like, I wouldn't blame you if you want to cut like Wingal down to 2 maybe, or just cut them completely and run something like Morgana instead. Morgana is definitely something I'd recommend, especially if you've got a lot more like OTT and, well, generically Protect and Excel clans that you're versing. So yeah, so that's pretty cool there. And then finally, we've got the grade 0s, which of course we have the 1 copy of Glyme. Yeah, found out his real name was Glyme, which, yeah, it's fine. Okay, cool, whatever. I'm not bothered, but yeah, I am kind of bothered. But yeah, Glyme it is. But one thing I will say about these new starters in general is that I absolutely love them. So, so when you start Vanguard, of course, on your first turn, you get a draw card to begin with, and then you ride the starter to then get another draw. So you've gotten 2 fresh cards after your mulligan, which can completely change your game plan. So like, you could open up a game with the Akane and be like, oh, okay, I'll ride Akane and get the effect off. That's cool. But then after those 2 draws, you might like get a Blaster Blade and be like, oh, cool, I got a Blaster Blade. Okay, I'll ride that instead, and then I'll pressure the rearguard column with Akane, and I'll do that instead. So I really like how it just makes the deck just a bit more. Like, you just don't know what you're going to get in the early game. So after the mulligan, it might be bad, but, you know, you may be grade stuck, for example. But then those 2 additional draws might give you the grades that you needed to not be grade stuck, which that's beautiful. I think that's really cool. And also, this card stays in the Soul, which means you've got a resource already in Soul for things like Soul Saver and also Blaster Blade to potentially use, which is also really nice. So, yeah, really, really nice. I hope they keep the starters like this for a good while. Who knows if they bring Forerunners back at some point? I kind of think they might, but I just hope they keep these ones around for quite a long time, because I really like them generally. So we have that, and then of course we have the triggers, which are going to be the 8 criticals with Epona and the Flogal. Yeah, 8 crit is pretty much standard at the minute for Royal Paladin, just because it's, you know, we can make huge numbers, but at the end of the day we're only going to be doing 1 damage, so that's why we need the crits there to, you know, add that extra layer of pressure. So that's really cool. Then we have the 4 draw trigger perfect guards, which are just beautiful. I absolutely love these. I love the fact that it's freed up the grade 1 slots so much better. Yeah, it's just really, really nice. And then, of course, the last trigger of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Elaine, the final grade 0, and the final trigger. Yeah, love her art, and also the 20k shields with heal triggers now is very, very nice. I really like it. So, yeah, that's essentially the deck. And then, of course, the only other things I have to show is my force markers, of course, which I've got my 4 Aichi force markers, and I've also got my 4 Blaster Blade force markers, which look really, really nice. I might pick up a signed one just for the collection at some point later in the future, but who knows. But I'm happy that they just got images on them, essentially, and it's Aichi and Blaster Blade, so that's cool. But yeah, that's essentially the deck. I hope I mentioned everything that I wanted to mention, and I'm sorry about the video length, but I kind of wanted to explain my reasons about my card choices a bit, and sort of hopefully give you guys ideas as well about what you could do to your decks. Yeah, if you stuck through the entire video, thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for listening to me blabber on about my favourite clan. Probably going to pick up my 4th copy of King of Knights Alfred next week, which I'm looking forward to. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one. So until then, guys, like always, take care and have a nice day. See you later, guys. Bye.